All right, so everybody's heard about the Roman Empire, right? But have you ever thought about how understanding the Roman Republic, like what came before the empire, can actually help us understand some of the problems that democracies face even today?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
That's what we're going to be looking at today
Yeah,
in our deep dive.
it's a great topic.
We're going to be going through a lecture from a professor who specializes in ancient Greece and Rome.
Yeah, and it's fascinating stuff because we're not talking about just togas and gladiators,
Right.
We're talking about things that are kind of timeless questions
Yeah.
about power and ambition and how do you actually govern a society.
And to do that, we're going to be talking about Polybius.
Polybius, yeah.
He wasn't just some historian who, was writing down names and dates and battles and stuff like that.
Well, wait.
He actually lived through this period.
Yeah.
He saw the rise of Rome,
He saw it firsthand.
and he was in the Greek world,
Yeah,
which was having kind of a freak out moment.
they were surprised.
Yeah.
Like, wait a minute.
Yeah, they did not see this coming.
This kind of less sophisticated power from their perspective
Yeah.
was suddenly like taking over everything.
Yeah, how did this happen?
So he had a really unique perspective.
He did.
Almost like an insider-outsider kind of thing.
He was a Greek hostage in Rome.
Yeah.
So he was living in Rome,
Like stuck there.
not by choice,
No.
but he was there, and yeah, grappling with this sudden shift in power.
Yeah, imagine trying to write a history book
Right.
while you're still living through the events that are shaping it.
Right.
I mean, you'd be constantly questioning everything.
That's exactly what makes his work, the histories, so interesting.
Right.
Because you see him grappling with these questions.
It's not just like, I'm going to record what happened.
Right.
It's like, why is this happening?
Why did this happen?
What's going on here?
Yeah.
And from that struggle, from that trying to figure out the why.
He came up with this theory of anacyclosis,
Anacyclosis. Yeah.
which is still something that people are talking about today.
It's this idea that governments
Yeah.
follow a cyclical pattern.
What does that mean?
Well, he was arguing that every form of government, no matter how well-intentioned, carries within it the seeds of its own destruction.
Oh.
And so he saw this cycle going from anarchy to kingship.
Okay.
Kingship degenerates into tyranny.
Uh-huh.
Tyranny is overthrown by aristocracy.
Uh-huh.
Aristocracy decays into oligarchy.
I'm following you.
And then eventually that sparks a revolution,
Right.
leading to democracy.
Okay.
But even democracy descends into mob rule,
Oh, so it just keeps going.
and then it collapses back into anarchy.
And then it starts all over again.
And the whole cycle begins anew.
So it's just like this up and down, up and down.
Yeah, roller coaster.
Yeah, a roller coaster of different types of government.
Exactly. A political roller coaster.
Forever looping back on itself.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so did he see any way to get off this roller coaster?
Well, that's where Rome comes in.
Okay.
He thought that the Romans,
Mm-hmm.
at least for a time, had figured out a way to delay the cycle,
Delay it.
maybe even break free.
Okay.
Because they had this mixed constitution.
Okay, so they mixed it up.
Yeah, he saw it as a brilliant system that blended elements of kingship, aristocracy, and democracy.
So they took like a little bit from column A, a little bit from column B.
Exactly.
What did that look like in practice?
Well, you have to imagine it this way.
Okay.
They had their consuls
Okay.
who sort of represented that energy and decisiveness of a monarch,
Right.
but their power was limited and shared.
Oh, okay.
And then you have the Senate,
Okay.
composed of, experienced elder statesmen,
Right.
providing wisdom and continuity.
Gotcha.
And then finally you have the people's assemblies,
Okay.
which gave a voice to the citizens.
So everybody had a say.
And it prevented the elite from becoming too detached
Right.
from the needs of the people.
So Polybius thought this balance of power was really crucial to why Rome lasted for so long.
That's what he thought.
But, I mean, does that still work today?
That's a great question.
If you think about our own government,
Yeah.
how do our checks and balances
Yeah.
compare to what Polybius was describing back in ancient Rome?
Yeah. That's something we can think about as we go through all this.
Yeah.
But before we get too far ahead of ourselves,
Okay.
let's go back and look at why Polybius was so interested in this idea of anacyclosis in the first place.
All right, so back to ancient Greece.
Back to Greece, yeah.
Didn't he use Athens as an example
He did.
to like show how this cycle worked?
He saw Athens, which was, thought of as this shining example of democracy.
Right.
He saw them ultimately succumbing to these pitfalls that he had outlined in his theory.
Oh.
He pointed to periods of mob rule,
Uh-huh.
struggles with powerful factions,
Okay.
their eventual decline
Right.
as evidence of this cyclical pattern.
So even Athens, which is, like you said, the poster child for democracy in a lot of ways,
You got it.
they weren't immune to this
Nope,
cycle of decay.
not at all.
So I guess that tells us that governing any society
Yeah,
is really hard,
it is. It's hard.
even if it's founded on these ideas of freedom and people getting to participate.
Yeah, it's a challenge.
Yeah.
And the really interesting thing is that this idea of anacyclosis wasn't just something that the Greeks thought about.
Really?
No, it resonated with thinkers all throughout history,
Like who?
like Aquinas in the Middle Ages,
Okay.
Machiavelli during the Renaissance,
Wow.
even the founding fathers of the United States.
Wait a minute. The founding fathers,
Yeah.
like the guys who basically wrote the Constitution,
The blueprint for American democracy.
were inspired by a Greek historian
It's wild, isn't it?
who lived over 2,000 years ago.
It really is.
That's crazy.
But it shows you how powerful these ideas are.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if maybe, just maybe, there are some universal truths about human nature and the challenges of governing
Right.
that go beyond, just a particular time or place.
So is this cycle, this anacyclosis, is that something that we are just like stuck with?
Are we destined to repeat the mistakes of the past?
Yeah. Are we just doomed?
Or can we, by understanding these patterns,
Right.
figure out a way to break free or at least make the bad parts a little less bad?
Yeah.
I think those are good questions to be thinking about.
Yeah.
And as we continue to look closer at the Roman Republic,
Right.
we should keep those questions in mind.
So did Rome actually escape the cycle
Did they figure it out?
like Polybius thought they did?
Yeah, was it really a solution
Or was it just like the kick the can down the road a little bit?
or just a temporary delay?
Yeah. So Polybius seemed to think that Rome's mixed constitution, like the way they set up their government, was a big reason why they were so successful.
Right, yeah.
But I mean, come on, like governments are made up of people
Of course.
and people are messy.
They are complicated.
So was it really just as simple as like they had a good constitution?
Well, you're right. A constitution, no matter how good it is, can't, solve all the problems that people create.
Right.
And that's what makes Rome's story so interesting.
So besides the Constitution, what else helped Rome become so powerful?
Well, one thing that often gets overlooked is how good they were at fighting wars.
Oh, yeah, the Roman army.
Yeah, but it wasn't just about being strong and tough.
So what else?
They were also really disciplined and organized.
Oh, okay.
And they were really good at adapting to different situations and coming up with smart plans.
Like they could think on their feet.
Yeah, they were masters of logistics and engineering, siege warfare, all that stuff.
And what about when they lost?
That's the amazing part. They learned from their defeats.
Oh, so they didn't just give up.
No, they would come back even stronger.
So like a learning machine, always getting better.
Exactly. They would even steal ideas from their enemies, take the best parts and use them for themselves.
Smart.
Like after Hannibal, beat them in the Second Punic War,
Mm-hmm.
they completely changed how their army was organized and how they fought and ended up beating Carthage.
Wow. So what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yeah, in Rome's case, that was definitely true.
But you can't build an empire on just a strong army, right?
No, of course not.
So what else was going on?
Well, the Romans also had a very particular political culture, like a set of beliefs and values about how things should work.
Okay, like what?
Early Romans were really big on civic duty, the idea that you have a responsibility to serve your community.
And not just think about yourself.
Right, and they also believed in following the law.
It sounds like they actually believed in the system.
They did, and they were willing to work within it, even when they disagreed.
I guess that's important for any system to work.
Oh, absolutely, whether it's a government or just a group of people working together.
Everyone needs to buy into the idea.
Yeah, they had this concept of the res publica, which means the public thing.
Like something bigger than just themselves.
Exactly something they were all responsible for taking care of.
And for a while, it worked really well.
It did. Rome expanded its power and influence all over the place.
But it didn't last forever.
Even with their great army and civic virtue, things started to fall apart.
What happened?
Well, remember those checks and balances that Polybius was so impressed by?
Yeah, keeping any one person from getting too much power.
Right. Well, over time, those started to weaken.
How?
Well, you had these ambitious generals and politicians.
Trying to climb to the top.
Exactly. And they used the freedoms of the Republic to gain power and wealth for themselves.
Even if it hurt everyone else.
Yeah, often at the expense of the state and the common good.
So the system that was supposed to prevent tyranny ended up making it easier for tyranny to happen.
It's kind of ironic, isn't it?
It really is.
You had guys like Marius, Sulla, Pompey, and of course Julius Caesar.
All those big names.
They're all brilliant military leaders and politicians,
Mm-hmm.
but they also had a lot of ambition, and they used that to get around the traditional rules.
Oh, no.
They created their own armies, challenged the Senate.
So much for checks and balances.
Yeah, and eventually they threw Rome into a bunch of civil wars.
So even the best system in the world can't always stop people from being greedy and power hungry.
That's the lesson, I guess. You can't always predict what people will do.
Did anyone see this coming? Could someone like Polybius have known this would happen?
That's something historians still argue about today.
Oh, really?
Some people say that Polybius was so focused on the ideal version of the Republic that he didn't see the problems that were growing beneath the surface.
Like what?
Well, things like economic inequality, social unrest, all the political maneuvering going on behind the scenes.
So like cracks in the foundation that were hidden until everything started to break down.
Exactly. And once those cracks got bigger, the whole system began to crumble.
Like a house of cards.
Yeah. And all those institutions that were supposed to make Rome stable and prosperous ended up being used for personal gain and political manipulation.
And then Augustus came along?
Yeah, Augustus, the first emperor of Rome.
He really changed everything, didn't he?
He did. He marked the end of the Roman Republic and the beginning of the Roman Empire.
So the Republic tried to get rid of kings, but ended up with an emperor.
It's almost like Polybius's theory in action.
Like the Republic was just a temporary break from the cycle.
It's a really interesting parallel.
It makes you wonder if the Republic really achieved all that much.
Or if it was all just a delay.
Yeah, like did anything from the Republic actually last?
That's something we'll talk about more in the last part of our deep dive.
Okay, so stay tuned for that.
But for now, think about this.
What's that?
If Polybius were alive today, what would he think about our modern democracies?
Would he see the same patterns happening all over again?
Would he think we're headed down the same path?
Or have we learned from the mistakes of the past?
We've got a lot to think about.
We do, so stick around as we tackle these big questions. Okay, so we've looked at this idea of anacyclosis, how governments go through these cycles.
Yeah.
And we've seen how the Roman Republic, rose and fell.
Right.
So, the big question now is...
Yeah, what about us?
Does any of this apply to, the modern world?
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah, we don't have togas and chariots running around.
Right.
But the basic stuff, the power struggles, people wanting more, how societies change, that's all still the same.
It's like human nature's the one thing that never really changes.
Yeah, I think you're right.
We might have all this technology and stuff, but we're still trying to figure out how to govern ourselves.
And that's why studying history is so important.
Right.
It's not just about memorizing a bunch of facts.
Right.
It's about seeing these patterns, understanding what makes societies tick.
So do you think, if Polybius could see our world today...
Yeah. What would he think?
What would he say?
Would he see anacyclosis happening?
Oh.
I think he'd be blown away by how complicated everything is.
Yeah, it's a lot.
On the one hand, we've made so much progress. Democracy, human rights, global connections. It's amazing.
Yeah.
But on the other hand,
Uh-oh.
there are some things happening that would probably fit right into his theory.
Like what? Give me an example.
Well, think about all the populism and division in politics these days.
Oh, yeah.
Polybius was really worried about demagogues.
Those are
charismatic leaders who take advantage of people's fears to get power for themselves.
We've definitely seen some of that lately.
Haven't we?
All this stuff about us versus them. It just makes people angry.
And it makes it harder to have real conversations.
Yeah, nobody trusts each other anymore.
And that's dangerous for democracy.
I think Polybius would also be interested in how much money influences politics today.
Oh, for sure.
He thought that was a big problem.
He did. He thought if too much wealth gets concentrated in the hands of a few people, it leads to oligarchy.
Which is basically rule by the rich.
Exactly.
So all those concerns about inequality and the super rich having too much power, those are still relevant today.
More than ever, I think.
Especially with globalization and all that.
Yeah, people can make huge fortunes and use that money to influence things all over the world.
It's kind of scary to think that even with all the progress we've made,
Right.
we're still vulnerable to the same problems that messed things up centuries ago.
But maybe knowing that can help us avoid those problems.
Yeah, forewarned is forearmed.
Exactly. If we know what to look out for,
Uh-huh.
we can be more careful and work to make our democracies stronger.
So what can we learn from all of this?
From Rome, from Polybius.
Yeah, how can we use those lessons to build better societies?
Well, one thing that stands out is how important it is for people to be involved in their communities.
Like not just sitting on the sidelines?
Right. The Roman Republic was at its best when citizens were active.
They debated, they served in government,
They held their leaders accountable.
they actually cared about what was happening.
They felt responsible for their society.
Yeah, that's a big one, feeling responsible.
And that's something we can all do, no matter who we are or where we live.
Like get involved in local stuff, talk to our representatives.
Now, hold them accountable.
Right, make our voices heard.
It all makes a difference.
Another thing we can learn from Rome is the importance of balance and moderation.
Oh, that's crucial.
They got in trouble when they started losing those checks and balances.
Yeah, Polybius was right about that.
Too much power in one person's hands
Or one group.
is never a good thing.
It's a recipe for tyranny.
So it's about finding that middle ground
Yeah, between freedom and responsibility.
between what people want and what's good for everyone.
It's a tough balance.
It is, but it's worth fighting for.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up this whole deep dive into Polybius and the Roman Republic,
Yeah.
I'm feeling a mix of things.
Like what?
A little bit worried, because history shows us how easily things can fall apart,
That's true.
but also hopeful because maybe by understanding the past,
Right.
we can avoid making the same mistakes.
I think that's the key.
Yeah. Learn from history,
So it doesn't repeat itself.
or at least not in the worst way.
Yeah.
So next time you hear about something happening in the world,
Uh-huh.
think about it like a historian.
Ask yourself, does this look familiar?
Are we seeing those same patterns again?
What can we learn from what happened before?
And most importantly,
What can we do to make things better?
this has been a great conversation.
It has. I've really enjoyed it.
I've learned a lot.
Me too.
So thanks for joining us on this deep dive into power, government, and why history still matters.
And thanks to everyone listening out there.
Keep those minds curious, and remember, the past can be a powerful tool.
For building a better future.
That's right. So until next time, keep exploring and keep thinking.